Welcome in. If you're joining us today, you are probably, well, you're the kind of person who constantly questions the architecture of the world around you.
Yeah, you want to know how things actually operate.
Exactly. You want to bypass all those endless pages of bureaucratic jargon to find the actual leverage points in our government. And today's deep dive is tailored specifically for you, the learner.
It really is.
So, our topic today, and we're pulling this from a very comprehensive Wikipedia article detailing its history, its jurisdiction, its membership, is the United States Senate Committee on Rules and Administration.
Which I know it sounds incredibly dry on paper.
Right, it really does.
But when you look closely at the specific body, you realize it is literally the administrative engine of the entire Senate.
Yeah, so the mission for our deep dive today is to uncover how this single, honestly, often overlooked committee quietly manages the most critical operational aspects of the legislative branch.
The hidden stuff.
The hidden stuff, yeah. We are talking about everything from charting the succession of the President of the United States, which is huge, all the way down to finalizing the vendor contracts for the Senate restaurant.
And just the juxtaposition of those responsibilities alone tells you a lot about the unique nature of this committee.
It's wild. Okay, let's unpack this. Because when most of us visualize congressional power, we picture the Senate floor.
Right.
We think of the high-profile filibusters, the sweeping legislative packages, fiery floor speeches.
The stuff that makes the evening news.
Exactly. But true, sustained power often lies in the rule book and the real estate. To understand how the Senate functions, you really have to understand the entity that maintains the physical building and writes the operational code.
Yeah, and a great way to frame the Senate Rules Committee is to contrast it directly with its counterpart in the House of Representatives.
The House Rules Committee.
Right. In the lower chamber, the House Committee on Rules is famously visibly powerful.
Oh, yeah.
They act as the ultimate traffic cops for legislation. They dictate the precise terms of debate for individual bills, determining how many hours a bill can be discussed, which specific amendments are allowed to be offered.
Or whether any amendments are allowed at all.
Exactly. They hold incredible gatekeeping power.
Meanwhile, the Senate Rules Committee is frequently characterized as the weaker sibling in that very specific legislative regard.
Yeah.
Because they do not have the authority to bottle up a bill or dictate strict debate terms for individual pieces of legislation before they hit the floor.
What's fascinating here is the underlying reason for that difference. It's entirely rooted in the institutional culture of the Senate.
How so?
Well, the Senate operates on a foundational tradition of open debate. It views itself as a deliberative body where any member can hold the floor.
Right.
So instituting a committee that arbitrarily limits debate or strictly manages amendments on individual bills that would fundamentally violate that entrenched Senate culture.
So they don't play legislative traffic cop. But assuming that makes them weak is a massive miscalculation.
A huge mistake.
Because their jurisdiction is one of the most eclectic, far-reaching portfolios in the federal government.
It's basically a catch-all for institutional power.
Yeah, looking at the breakdown of their duties, it is an incredible mix of high-stakes, constitutional oversight, and literal property management.
Right, so on the constitutional side, they are the guardians of the electoral process.
Which means what, exactly?
It means they have broad jurisdiction over federal elections generally. That includes the election of the president, the vice president, and members of Congress.
Wow.
Yeah. If there's a dispute regarding corrupt practices or a contested election, this committee takes the lead.
They also handle the credentialing and qualifications of Senate members.
They do. If a senator's right to be seated is challenged, this committee conducts the investigation.
If we ever face a vacancy in the vice presidency or some sort of crisis regarding presidential succession,
the Rules Committee is the body tasked with navigating those waters.
those are fundamental republic-sustaining duties. If an election is contested or the line of succession is compromised, they are the tip of the spear.
Absolutely.
But then you turn the page on their jurisdictional mandate, and the tone shifts dramatically.
Yeah, it gets so random.
It really does. It turns into facilities and event management. They are responsible for the administration of the Senate office buildings and the highly coveted assignment of office space.
Which is a huge deal for senators.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And they oversee the Senate library, they manage the government publishing office, and oversee the correction of the congressional record.
And that last point is actually crucial. Overseeing the congressional record means they oversee the official, permanent, historical record of what is said and done on the Senate floor.
which is an incredible amount of institutional leverage.
It really is.
And the list just keeps going into the cultural and aesthetic footprint of the Capitol. They're in charge of the statuary, the art, the historical pictures hanging in the building,
They authorize the purchase of rare books and manuscripts.
and oversee the erection of monuments.
Yeah.
And perhaps my favorite combination of duties. They have jurisdiction over the Smithsonian Institution, the United States Botanic Garden, and all services to the Senate, which includes managing the Senate restaurant.
I mean, think about the cognitive whiplash of being a staffer or a senator on this committee.
Right.
Your morning briefing might cover federal election security protocols and investigating a contested ballot count.
Sure.
Then, after lunch, you are reviewing acquisitions for a museum, checking on the campus greenhouses, and dealing with complaints about the cafeteria menu.
It sounds totally absurd until you look at the Senate as a self-contained ecosystem.
Exactly.
Because a massive, globally impactful organization still needs an HR department, an IT department, and a facilities management team.
And the Rules Committee is all of those things, fused with a constitutional mandate.
Yeah. Without them managing the physical space, the operational budget, and the credentialing of the members, the high-profile legislative debates simply could not occur.
They are the foundation of the institution. But, and this is important, this centralized catch-all committee didn't always exist in this format.
Right.
The structural history here reveals a very deliberate evolution.
Yeah. It began shortly after the Civil War on December 3rd, 1867, and it was originally called the Select Committee to Revise the Rules of the Senate.
And being a select committee meant it was originally intended to be a temporary ad hoc group convened for a single purpose.
Just to fix the rules and disband.
Exactly. But the realities of governing meant that rule revision was a constant necessity. So by December 9th, 1874, the Senate formalized it, converting it into a permanent standing committee, simply named the Committee on Rules.
Here's where it gets really interesting. For over 70 years, it operated primarily as just the Committee on Rules.
Right.
Then we hit January 2, 1947. This is the inflection point, where it received its modern title, the Committee on Rules and Administration, and underwent a massive structural expansion.
Because the post-World War II era forced the federal government to modernize, and Congress was no exception.
Everything was getting bigger.
Yeah, the 1947 reorganization was about efficiency. The Rules Committee absorbed several distinct, highly specialized committees to centralize operations.
What kind of committees?
Well, for instance, it took over the committee to audit and control the contingent expenses of the Senate.
Oh, wow. Controlling contingent expenses is massive. That essentially means holding the purse strings for the Senate's internal discretionary operational budget.
Precisely.
If another committee wanted to launch an expensive investigation or hire a special counsel, the money flowed through that contingent expense mechanism.
So consolidating the rule book and the checkbook into one committee immediately elevated its power.
Absolutely.
But they also absorbed the Committee on Enrolled Bills.
And for those unfamiliar with the mechanics, an enrolled bill is the final official copy of a piece of legislation that has passed both chambers in identical form.
Right, before it goes to the president.
Yeah, it has to be meticulously proofread and printed on parchment before it hits the president's desk. It is a highly exacting technical administrative process.
They also absorbed the Committee on Privileges and Elections, which cemented their grip on electoral oversight and member credentialing.
The timeline notes they temporarily took on functions from the Committee on Education and Labor as well, though those duties eventually migrated to what we now know as the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the 1947 consolidation was a masterclass in institutional centralization.
Yeah.
Instead of having fragmented bodies handling the money, the final legislative text, the election disputes, and the rules, the Senate pooled all that operational leverage into a single administrative supercommittee.
Which naturally leads us to look at who actually wields this consolidated power today.
The current roster.
Right. Bring us to the present. We have the roster for the 119th Congress, which kicks off on January 3, 2025. And I want to pause here for a second and just make a very clear disclaimer to you, the listener.
Yes, very important.
Because our source material contains political affiliations, we have to state that we are strictly reporting the factual roster provided in the source.
We are not taking any political sides.
Exactly. We aren't endorsing any viewpoints or parties here. We're simply conveying the factual makeup of the committee as it exists on paper.
Right. So looking at the facts of the 119th Congress roster, the raw numbers tell a story of tight margins.
The committee is made up of 17 members. The majority consists of 9 Republicans, with Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky serving as the chair.
And the minority holds 8 seats, composed of Democrats, led by the ranking member, Senator Alex Padilla of California.
And for anyone keeping track of committee hierarchy, the ranking member is simply the most senior member of the minority party on the committee, serving as their lead voice.
Exactly. And scanning the rest of the roster, it becomes immediately apparent that this is not a dumping ground for junior lawmakers.
Definitely not.
You know, administrative committees in some organizations are treated as secondary assignments, but in the Senate, this committee is stacked with heavyweights.
You see prominent Republicans like Ted Cruz, Shelley Moore Capito, and Katie Brett. And on the Democratic side, you have the former Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, alongside veterans like Amy Klobuchar, Mark Warner, and Peter Welch.
The presence of party leaders and top-tier strategists really underscores the hidden value of this committee.
Yeah.
Because when you are operating at the highest levels of government, you want a seat at the table where the foundational rules are interpreted. You want to be where the institutional budget is managed and where election disputes are adjudicated.
But holding the gavel on this committee is historically precarious.
Oh, extremely.
Before the committee's power is so deeply intertwined with the overall take-up of the Senate, leadership changes can be incredibly chaotic.
And there is no better example of this than the year 2001.
During the 107th Congress.
Yes. The 107th Congress was an anomaly because the Senate was split exactly 50-50.
Right down the middle.
And with a tied chamber, control of the majority, and therefore control of all committee chairmanships, hinged entirely on the vice presidency, because the vice president casts tie-breaking votes.
And 2001 featured a presidential transition right in the middle of January, creating an unprecedented game of political musical chairs.
It was wild.
Let's trace the timeline, because it's fascinating. From January 3rd to January 20th, the outgoing administration was still in power, meaning a Democratic vice president held the tiebreaker.
Right.
So for those 17 days, the Democrats held the majority. Senator Chris Dodd served as the chair of the Rules Committee, and Senator Mitch McConnell was the ranking member.
But then comes Inauguration Day on January 20th. The new Republican administration is sworn in.
The tie-breaking vote flips to the new vice president.
Instantly, control of the entire Senate flips. Mitch McConnell takes the gavel as chair of the Rules Committee, and Chris Dodd moves down to ranking member.
You would assume things settled down after the inauguration.
You would think so.
But fast forward to June 6, 2001. Senator Jim Jeffords of Vermont makes a historic move, changing his affiliation from Republican to Independent and choosing to caucus with the Democrats.
That single decision broke the 50-50 tie internally.
Power flipped for the third time in 6 months.
Which meant Chris Dodd reclaimed the chairmanship and Mitch McConnell returned to the ranking member seat.
That 6-month window perfectly encapsulates the fragility of administrative power in a closely divided government.
Because the logistical reality of those flips is staggering. It's not just a title change.
Right. What actually happens?
Every time the chair changes, committee budgets are reallocated. Majority staff directors swap offices with minority staff directors. The entire agenda is rewritten.
It also highlights that the administrative leadership of the legislative branch can be entirely rewritten by external factors like a presidential inauguration or the personal decision of a single senator.
Yeah, and it isn't always shifts in party control that shuffle the deck. The history of this committee is full of interterm leadership changes triggered by the broader Senate chessboard.
Right. Senators often treat committee chairmanships strategically, moving to where they can exert the most influence or where their caucus needs them most due to sudden vacancies.
Yeah, for instance, Senator Ted Stevens took over as chair of the Rules Committee in 1995, but he stepped down midterm.
And the catalyst wasn't an election, right?
No, it was the resignation of another senator entirely, Bob Packwood. Packwood's departure created a sudden vacancy at the top of the Governmental Affairs Committee, which Stevens left the Rules Committee to fill.
We saw a similar cascade in 2018, too. Senator Richard Shelby stepped down as chair of the Rules Committee specifically so he could take over the Appropriations Committee after Senator Thad Cochran resigned.
The Rules Committee is immensely powerful, but it is also part of a larger ecosystem of influence that these senior lawmakers are constantly navigating.
So what does this all mean for the institution today? We have covered their day-to-day property management, their role in elections, their chaotic leadership history. But stepping back, what is the highest level mandate of the Committee on Rules and Administration?
Ultimately, their mandate is institutional preservation. They are the defensive shield for the legislative branch.
Okay, defensive shield.
Yeah, they have two very specific strategic responsibilities that highlight this. First, they are required to identify any court proceeding or action that is of vital interest to Congress as a constitutionally established institution and call it to the Senate's attention.
So they act as the institutional lookout.
Exactly. If there is a lawsuit moving through the federal judiciary that threatens the separation of powers or attempts to diminish the privileges of the legislative branch, the Rules Committee is tasked with sounding the alarm.
They are defending the Senate's prerogatives against the executive and judicial branches.
And the second major mandate is focused inward. They are charged with developing, implementing, and constantly updating a strategic plan for the functional and technical infrastructure support of the Senate.
And we aren't just talking about fixing the elevators here.
No, not at all.
We are talking about the technological continuity of government. Cybersecurity, secure communication networks, ensuring that the legislative branch can literally continue to function in an era of digital threats.
Right. The rest of the chamber is focused on public-facing policy, debating healthcare, tax reform, or foreign relations.
The loud stuff.
The loud stuff. Meanwhile, the Rules and Administration Committee is operating behind the scenes to ensure the physical building stands, the elections are certified, the legal threats are identified, and the technological infrastructure doesn't collapse.
It is the ultimate paradox. We started out noting how this committee lacks the visible debate-controlling muscle of its counterpart in the House.
Right.
But when you look at the totality of its jurisdiction, it holds the keys to the entire operation. They credential the members, manage the operational budget, protect the institution from lawsuits, maintain the historical record, and oversee the physical Capitol complex down to the botanical gardens.
Which raises an important question, especially when you look at their ongoing charge to continuously study the organization of Congress and recommend improvements.
Because they are tasked with simplifying operations and strengthening Congress's relationship with other branches.
They're essentially the architects of congressional reform.
Precisely.
And knowing they control the internal rulebook, the technological infrastructure, and the oversight of electoral credentials, how might the subtle administrative choices made by the single committee today ultimately dictate the balance of power in the entire federal government tomorrow?
That's a huge question.
Because when you control the architecture of the arena, you inevitably shape the outcome of the battles fought inside it.
Because administrative choices are never just administrative town. They're the framework of power. To you, the learner, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you walk away with a sharper understanding of how the invisible engines of government actually operate. Keep looking past the obvious, keep questioning the structures around you, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.